We run our chickens in 2 separate flocks. Right now we have some on pasture and some in the compost chicken yard behind me. I guess the question remains, which is better? Yeah, we've just moved the chickens this morning into a new area, but they've had access to this entire portion of the pasture for the last month or more. The remainder of our chickens live over in this coop, and they get an opportunity to be out in the compost chicken yard. Come on, you guys. This is the most immature pile that I have currently in the yard, and I'll be continually adding to it over the course of the next few weeks. Things like coffee grounds, lawn clippings, other yard waste, and food scraps. And the rest of these piles are not in a hot state. They are actually kind of in more of a cold and resting state, but there's a lot of biological activity. They come across a lot of soil life. There's a tremendous amount of worms as they work their way down through here. Let's see if I can open this up just real quick. See if there's anything in here. Yeah, so as they work their way into these piles, as you can see, there's just a plethora of protein. There's also worm eggs. There is other biota that it's not very easy for us to detect, but the hens seem to know exactly what it is they're going for. I've laden a bunch of seed and grain throughout, and so they will come across sprouts, and the hens will continually scratch them and peck them and work them, which helps to not only blend and mix the material, but it provides that aeration, that oxygen that the piles need. So the flow in this compost yard is that all the material comes in through this gate, which is at a higher elevation than where the camera is set up down toward that end. The material comes in, it'll get deposited up in this region, and then as these piles continually mature and develop, they'll get tumbled downhill toward the exit chute. The hens assist with that as they comb through these daily, try to focus the hens' attention on these piles that are in a further state of development. Even though they're a cold pile, I continually add food to them, and that allows them to place their interest here. While the piles that I'm currently trying to get to hot compost, I don't want them to completely obliterate those piles and rip them apart. So I need to be able to maintain a mass of material and kind of a core, and I'll try to discourage their activity from ripping that apart so it can remain hot for as long as possible. Once it kind of runs through its hot stage and I'm no longer adding to that pile, then I will start to feed that with a bunch of seed and things that are going to encourage them. Every morning I fold in a mixture of black oil sunflower seed, corn, and millet. Some of the seed and grain that doesn't get found will turn to sprouts like this, and they'll eventually get eaten. It serves multiple benefits. What they're extracting directly contributes to the health of the birds. It also has another benefit of allowing them to do something that they're going to do anyhow. Chickens, if you don't direct their focus on where you want them to put that energy, they're going to find a place to put that energy. If they're out in a free range type of an environment, they're going to put that energy in a place in a way you didn't exactly want them to. So this really helps to redirect their focus on concentrating on these piles, which not only has a benefit for us as someone who's trying to generate compost, but it's a direct benefit to them because it contributes to what they're going to naturally want to do. And they get out and they're healthy, they're happy. Come on. It's always interesting to watch these birds as they first come out. They're going to look for what is closest to the surface and what's, easiest obtained as far as from a food perspective. But once they determine that there's nothing really that easy to get after, they're going to start scratching and working their way into these piles. And those hens that are over there on top of that nearest pile, they're actually working through those worms that I just unearthed a little while ago and are nearest to the surface. So they're having quite a little breakfast snack over there and doing their best work. Those australorps are actually a very, very heavy scratcher. Those birds do really good work in the compost yard. They're probably one of the heaviest birds as far as from a scratching perspective that I have currently. Not the most active, but when they do scratch, they move a lot of material. This short segment represents about 1 hour's worth of time lapse, and it's very representative of what happens every morning when the chickens are let out. They'll run around and scour these piles to try to determine which pile is the best to concentrate their efforts on. And as you can see here, they've decided to concentrate on that pile in the rear. Now I'll be adding at least a wheelbarrow load of this every day. In addition, I'll be also adding some browns along with it. They'll work over that this afternoon, and then I'll fold it again in the morning. I'm going to probably continue to add about 2 wheelbarrow loads per day. 1 wheelbarrow load of nitrogen and 1 wheelbarrow load of carbon, with food scraps and any other inputs that I can obtain. And this will continue to grow over those next 10 days. And the center of it will remain hot. The center of it will not be broken down by these hens, and it will have a pretty good start at a hot compost. Before this leaves this yard, we'll probably wind up being in here for at least 6 months. At this point, I've got enough material cached in here that as the planting season gets underway here, I'm going to start bringing some of this material out and amending some of the beds that I have on my property. I'll be side dressing some of the more established perennials and putting this in some of the hugel mounds. There have been a number of people who have asked what the purpose of the milk crates in the yard are, and although they're not the most aesthetically pleasing, the price for them was actually right, given that I got them for free. But essentially what their primary function is a movable barrier that kind of contains the compost in the yard. And if I want to make any of these bays divided because of the differing ages of compost, I can easily just shift these to kind of isolate some of this material. This was another idea that I got from Sean over at Edible Acres, where he was incorporating the use of these milk crates in his system. I decided to try them here, and they've worked out quite well for about a year now. Another thing that I use these milk crates for is just a place to cache all of the bones that I wind up collecting out of these piles. And these bones will be taken over to my biochar retort. I'll make charcoal out of them, and then I will return them back to this compost, where it will be crushed and incorporated into these piles. And it will assist with providing microbial habitat and moisture retention. And this char will wind up living in the soil, in the earth, for potentially thousands of years. Right about the time that I started this pile, I had one of my birds that died. And so she's inside of this pile right now, decomposing. And I like to make sure that any birds that I put, or anything that I don't want the rest of the flock to get after, and I want it to actively decompose, I'll keep it well hidden inside of these piles and try to keep them as hot as possible in between 130 degrees and 160 degrees. And so if I were to guess, she's probably right down in this region here, all the way at the bottom of this pile. And we'll go ahead and take a sample of what we've got for temperature and see where we can, what it's reading. On up to 120, creeping its way up into that lower end of that thermophilic range. On up around 130 now, and that may continue to rise a few degrees more. Although I've been adding to this pile every day, it isn't exactly growing by leaps and bounds because it's actively decomposing every day. So even though the material is being brought in, there's material that's decomposing, causing this pile to shrink a little bit each day as well. Check the temperature where we're at, center of this pile. It looks to be about 136 or so. More coffee grounds. Yeah, I try to keep my ratios fairly well balanced as they should be, but I know that my compost in this yard is very nitrogen rich. And I'm okay with that because I play this kind of for the long game. I'm not looking to turn this around necessarily in a very short order. I'll allow it to do what it does during the hot stage, and then we'll continually work it in this yard, and it'll remain in this yard, and all the biological activity that goes on within that pile is going to have a chance to kind of balance things out. Yeah, I try to keep my ratios somewhat balanced as far as carbon and nitrogen, but I do know that because I utilize animal manures, to a greater extent than is recommended. Recommended is 60% carbon, 40% nitrogen, with 10% of that 40% being of animal manures. And my animal manures are a great deal higher than that, just because of the availability that I have to the livestock manure here on the property. Yeah, one of the ways we feed these chickens and keep the cost down, make compost, is free stuff. We've established a relationship with a local food bank, stuff that they can't turn around and give to the general public, and we take and bring it here. There's some cucumbers and some bananas and some expired pears and some salad mix and bananas and peppers. All of this material that I just added is grass clippings that I got from the local high school. Their soccer fields and their ball fields, they wind up mowing, and then they cache this material out back. And this is all material that's been untreated. It's just another source of nitrogen that I can bring in. And since I was at the high school anyhow today, I just decided to bring a little bit home with me to add to this pile. But you just need to continually look for opportunities if you're going to be utilizing waste streams for your composting. This pile is now 9 days old, and I'm going to continually add to it for about another week. I wound up folding it in this morning. It's still holding a good deal of heat, and every day I just keep folding it back over on top of itself as the hens kind of kick apart the periphery. But let me take a temperature, and we'll just get an idea of what we're working with here as far as how well this is holding heat. Yeah, it's still got a good bit of heat up in it, and it's rising rapidly past 140. These guys have been pretty patient today, but I think they want out. And they've been able to comb through here and eat what grass they want to eat, but primarily they're in here to consume the insects and the bugs that they find, and they've been able to work this entire area. And we'd like to try to move them before they get a chance to do too much damage, but they're in a new area this morning and they're having quite a good go at it. So I'm going to take you over and kind of show you their activity. Before the temperatures get too hot and the pasture starts to dry up, we're going to move them back over into the compost chicken yard, and they'll have all of that activity to contend with. They're enjoying themselves quite a bit over here right now. As you can see, they're combing through all this old rice straw and finding good things down in there. No complaints. This is how we feed food scraps to the hens while they're over here on pasture. And I did a video earlier talking about how and why we do this, and I'll put a link to that video in the pinned comment. Well, I can't leave these girls out. Let's see what they're gonna have. Meatball marinara, little turkey and cheddar. What do we got here? So what's the answer to the question of out on pasture or here in the compost yard? I think that there's no real loser in either of those two answers. And it's obviously a personal choice on how anybody wants to run their particular flock or flocks. If I had only one of these systems to choose, which would I prefer? My answer would be right here in this chicken yard, because for one, I think that they are better provided for nutritionally. There's every bit of the diversity and the amount of soil life that they have to contend with here. There's a tremendous amount of worms and other biota that they're able to extract on a daily basis. And this is the primary place where I bring in all those food scraps. Now out on pasture, if that's properly managed rotationally, it can be very beneficial to the property. However, the compost that we generate out of this system is also very, very beneficial to the system and the property that we have. This would be my preference. And again, there's never any real loser in providing your hens the opportunity to get out of their enclosure and do what chickens like to do, which is to be active and to have room to roam. If this sort of content is something that you're interested in, please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the bell notification for future and upcoming videos. We release a video, one long form video every week on Saturday. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.